help you?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to get in on the call. How do I do that?
Once the program starts.
Supposed to start, should I hit the arrow on the?
Hi, welcome to Bourne Call In. This is our first show tonight, and I want to say welcome to everybody. I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to explain the procedures for calls and answers. I'll do a little presentation, and my other guests will do a little talk. Once my presentation is done, you can call in with questions. Somebody is at the phone, they'll write the questions down and give them to me one at a time or two at a time. They'll give us the questions. As we go forward, you can keep calling in with questions, and even after the show, you leave your phone number, we'll call you back and answer the questions as best we could. We only have 28 minutes, we're very limited on time, and people are gonna start calling in. We're limiting people to one question, not a follow-up question. If you wanna do a follow-up question, you gotta call back and ask. So one question at a time, please, and please kind of follow that procedure. And no repeat questions. If somebody asks a question, you don't repeat and ask another question. If you want to have a question, you can ask it. So we got to keep the show moving because we do only have 28 minutes for total. And tonight's show, this show will cover many subjects. It'll cover the machine gun range. It'll cover cable. It'll cover all things that are pressing in the community at the time. It'll give another option for people to maybe get a little more information on a particular subject. And moving forward, tonight's show is an overview of the Buzzards Bay Coalition's presentation last week. I wasn't excited about the modeling. A lot of people weren't. They'd like to see a little more modeling. And then my guest speaker tonight, Tom, has been involved for a number of decades with the Buzzards Bay Coalition and different groups regarding wastewater. So without any further ado, I'm going to start with my presentation, basically, and it'll be quick. All right, first you got to realize this is Buzzards Bay. It's approximately 4 to 5 miles across the bottom of Buzzards Bay. So when the tide starts dropping, the water goes this way rapidly, drops to about 4.5 feet in Buzzards Bay. We have a number of sewer outfalls in Buzzards Bay already. There's one at Dartmouth, one at New Bedford, one at Fairhaven. There was one in Mattapoisett, but the one in Mattapoisett was abandoned, and Mattapoisett's doing groundwater discharge, no more outfall into the ocean there. Marion still has a plant that drops into, actually, Buzzards Bay. Wareham still has their plant. Their plant's located way up the Wareham River. It's almost like the lazy river in Disney World. It hardly moves at all. So, the water goes out of there, but not at any great speed. And then there's outfall at Mass Maritime. We're really not going to talk about that specific outfall. We're going to talk about that area. So first, to kind of give you a little more knowledge on the Cape Cod Canal and how it's been constructed through the years, the perceived side view of the canal by most people is that it's 35 foot deep from one end to the other. So you think water's just going to go back and forth. But that's not actually the case. The tide in Buzzards Bay goes up and down 4.5 feet, and it's 35 feet deep, let's say. At the other end of the canal, 7 miles away, it's 4.5 feet deeper. Well, this little wedge on the bottom is actually water space. So it's 4.5 feet deeper on there, by 450 feet wide, by 7 miles long. So that's a huge amount of water on the bottom of the canal. And you have to understand that in order for a ship to come in from this end, from the Buzzards Bay end, on a falling tide, they have 35 foot clearance here. They have to have 35 clearance all the way down through. So to account for the extra fall of tide actually has to be deeper. So if you were dumping anything in up here, it wouldn't necessarily go all the way through because the tide's dropping all the time also. So the water that's in the canal is leaving, doesn't leave very much, and it's basically designed, it's hard to understand, but it's simple. It's 4.5 feet deeper on that end. It's 450 feet wide at that end. This end is the narrowest end of the canal. Right, Grey Gables to Mass Maritime is the closest point on the canal. So it's much bigger on that end. So deeper, wider, the water goes down about that far, and it will come back. It's very interesting if you really follow it. But that's a big issue with the canal, so that anything is dumped in right here doesn't necessarily go out the other end. It just doesn't happen. There's not enough to push it out. Because as I showed you, on Buzzards Bay, this is 450 feet wide. This water is going through this channel this way. On the other end of Buzzards Bay, when the tide starts dropping, it starts dropping an hour earlier before it starts dropping at the Maritime Academy at Wings Neck. So for an hour, that whole bay, which is 4 miles wide, is going the other way. So the water's not gonna go back towards Sandwich as much as it has been perceived. It will come towards Buzzards Bay. Now we're going to talk about Buzzards Bay. Buzzards Bay is dredged to 35 foot right up through the middle to allow for the passage of large displacement hulls. And what I mean by large is 500 tons is not abnormal going through the canal. Ships that big, they're really deep, they draw a lot of water, and they immediately, when they're in an area, they displace millions of gallons of water. That water has to go somewhere. When they come up the canal this way, when the tide's going out, let's say the tide comes down this way, if there's a ship here, it's like a big plug in the channel. The water comes down and goes in front of Mashney Island, almost to Wings Neck, then it comes down this way. So all this area will be exposed if a dye test is done, or if sewage is dumped in the water. It's going to come from there, it's going to come right down here, and it's going to go right over towards the Wings Neck and around. And that's why we want a dye test. We want a dye test for at least 7 days, 24 hours a day, with the tide going both ways, so that everybody has a good idea of what the actual impact area. Now when they go up further here, when you get to Mashney Island and Burgess Point, and you come through in Hog Island, that little triangle right there, all these pink areas here, those are all sandbars. They're all sandbars. So when the tide's dropping and a ship comes through here, it's like a big plug. It stops the water. The water on the Mashney Dike Flat right here, where it's shallow, can rise over a foot in about 10 seconds. As the ship moves up towards Grey Gables, people in Grey Gables witness the same thing. On their beaches, in their coves, when the ship goes by, it displaces all the natural water that's there. That water has to go somewhere. It goes right up here. It also goes over the Taylor's Point. This is Mass Maritime here. Goes right over that flat. Goes right over this flat into Onset. The water just goes in there. Once the ship goes by, it rushes back out. But if that was all wastewater, it would be put over here. And it would, obviously, Grey Gables, it's bad enough now with Mass Maritime, but if there was 3 million gallons of water, or 10 million gallons of water, it wouldn't be good. I mean, the water's not going to come up any higher, but it would actually be wastewater. And even though we were told that it wouldn't affect up here, all the way up here in this channel going to the Little Buttermilk Bay, when a large ship goes through and plugs right here between Mashney and Hog Island and Burgess Point, when a ship's passing through here, when the tide is dropping, it stops the tide all the way up here, way up in Little Buttermilk Bay, and sometimes it actually turns the tide for a couple of minutes. It's unbelievable. So that's a huge amount of water that gets displaced and pushed back. And again, when the tide starts dropping, the perception is this might go up the canal. The tide at Wings Neck turns an hour before the tide at the railroad bridge, which is right here. Turns an hour. So the tide gets rolling going this way already. Anything that is in this area is going to go down the bay further. The next time the tide comes, in my opinion, it's going to come in into these estuaries here. It's going to come up into Squetig right here. It's not going to go all the way back to Sandwich. It's going to go into Bourne. It's very likely. They don't want to do a dye test. They want to rely heavily on modeling, which just indicated it would go back and forth here, which is, you know, the tide's going 6 miles an hour. 6 miles an hour for 36 miles would be a long way. So I'm going to have to break it off. But that's basically where we are, and that's what you can ask me questions on. I'm going to turn it over to Tom.
Hi, Tom Barlow. I served as a Buzzards Bay Water Commissioner back in 2002, 2005. And, you know, from that experience, I learned a little bit about water. Buzzards Bay Water District has 2 million gallon tanks. You can see them, you know, in the middle of town and going down 28, you know, on the scenic highway there on the left-hand side. We store water there, and we have several pumps, and we feed, you know, the residents of the Buzzards Bay area. You know, before I was a water commissioner, I thought that, you know, those pumps could pump whatever we needed. And, you know, we could have as much water as we needed, because every time I turned on my sink, you know, I had plenty of water. But that's not how it works. You know, we draw water from an aquifer, and we get a permit. And even though we can draw 3, 4, 5 times the amount of that permit, we're not allowed to. We're only able to draw a certain amount of gallonages per day. And that goes the same for other water districts. We're permitted to, so that we don't draw down the aquifer so that we run out of water. And in the summertime, you know, we'll send our trucks out and put signs up and saying, you know, don't water your lawns. So we know that it's burning up, but you know, you're using too much water. This, you know, we're not going to do mandatory as long as you know, voluntarily, you know, water your lawns every, you know, couple of days and not every day. And you know, a couple of years ago, we had a splash pad down in Buzzards Bay, and it didn't recycle water, and the town turned it on, and you know, we had to go down and tell them, hey, you can't do that. We don't have enough water to run that splash pad as much as you'd like. Maybe you can turn it on sometimes, but you can't run it the way you want to run it. So you know, our water rates, when you use water, you get so much water at one rate. Then when you hit what we consider a point of usage that we're concerned about, we increase your rate. And it's tiered up like that. The more water you use, the more you're going to pay for it. And that's to motivate you to use less water, to conserve water. You know, we have bathroom toilets that went from 5 gallons to 3 gallons so that you use less water. There's shower heads that conserve water because we don't have unlimited water. So with that mindset that we don't have all the water that we want, that we have limited supply of water. When the presentation the other night said, we want to take 10 million gallons of water. Now, sewage water is about 99% fresh water. And we want to take 10 million gallons per day, and discharge it into the bay. You know, from the person that's supplying you the water for drinking, That's just so crazy. It's just such poor thinking that we have 10 million gallons of water per day to discharge out into the bay. Never mind about what it's going to do to the bay, what it's going to do to Great Gables, what the impact is on the water quality and the water salinity and all the you know, stuff that goes into sewerage. And you can just go online and look at what sewerage out. It's so much more than just nitrogen. So, you know, just from that perspective of discharging that much water and not recharging the aquifer by doing groundwater discharge, it just not being a steward of the environment. You know, it's something that's just totally wrong to do. Skipper mentioned earlier is Mattapoisett abandoned its discharge so that could do groundwater discharge. And if you saw the presentation of Buzzards Bay by the Buzzards Bay Coalition, you know, fellow suggested going out, putting it in the middle of the bay, and as all these other towns did. And so I jumped on that and put the question to them, and they said, you know, that they didn't look at that alternative. And then I pressed further and I said, you know, what is Wareham going to do if it doesn't have the pipe to discharge at the canal? And they said, we're going to go to a groundwater discharge. So what that means is that they'll no longer go out into the bay, that they will abandon their discharge, and they will recharge the aquifer. You know, cost-wise, it's more expensive, but environmentally wise, it's the right thing to do. We expect people in our community to go with groundwater discharge. When the middle school was built, we triggered the 40,000 gallons per day between the high school, the middle school, and at that time it was the Peebles School. And we put a groundwater discharge facility, wastewater treatment facility at the middle school. And if you just take a ride behind the middle school, you'll see that facility. We didn't say we're going to treat it to secondary treatment and run a pipe to the canal and discharge it. You know, that was not on the table. The same thing happened for Cassett Trailer Park. You know, about 200 trailers there. Now, you know, the economics of it, you know, would be great if the person could have done it to secondary treatment and discharge it and save some money, but that's not the case. That person was forced to go forward and have groundwater discharge and meet groundwater standards. Same thing, Brookside, the large development golf course on MacArthur Boulevard, lots of houses. You know, when their development went forward, there was no option of going into the canal, doing and
Tom,
Back River's right
excuse
there.
me, you have a question for you.
Okay.
And that's from Kathy.
Okay.
And she's asking, want me to read it to you?
Sure.
Okay. She's asking you if Mass Maritime Academy is allowed to discharge 24/7 or on certain tides. If you looked at the permit, was there any restriction that restricted them to certain tides, or are they allowed just 24/7?
As far as I know, there was no time restriction. It's a same thing as the drawing a water permit is that you're allowed to discharge so much gallonage per day, and they usually do it, you know, based on need when they discharge. You know, all the plants are like that.
Yeah, I do want to explain that we did invite the operator of the Mass Maritime
Oh, yes.
sewer plant to come in on the show. We also invited Guy Campina, who's the superintendent of the Wareham sewer plant. The town administrator wasn't comfortable with Guy coming, and the Mass Maritime operator had a prior commitment and couldn't come, but he said if there's questions, I could forward it to him, and I'd have them for the next show. So we'll forward this question to him tomorrow
Sure.
and see if
I
we
d-
can get a better answer.
If I just want to say a minute, is that we're not trying to vilify anybody. I've known Guy Campina since high school. You know, I'm friends with his children. He's friends with my children. You know, it's known him for a long time. Very optimistic, charismatic guy. Very friendly, very outgoing. You know, he personally, you know, this is you know, the coalition carrying the water for Wareham and the Mass Maritime Academy. These two entities are the ones that will benefit from doing, you know, wastewater discharge at the plant. He strongly believes this. He loves wastewater. He loves you know, the whole process. Always has. You know, from the time he was just a, you know, an operator over there. You know, he sees this similar to what we did here in Bourne with trash, which is the opportunity to make money for his community, expand the plant, bring in other people, charge a host fee. You know, we you know, have free recycling because other communities bring trash to our facility. We have administrative fees that defer costs to other costs to the town. It's a, you know, large benefit to the town. You know, he loves his town. He wants to see his town succeed as well, you know, and you know, I wish he was able to come here and talk about how this would benefit his community and how his community would generate revenue and it would help his town on a, you know, yearly basis when, you know, you're doing the budget and you can defer costs and, you know, add expenses.
So basically what you're saying is, for the whole environment of the towns who would participate in this, including Buzzards Bay still has a 200,000 gallon per day agreement with Wareham. Am I correct?
Yes,
Approximately,
it's
yeah.
about 17–18% that we pay for costs that are incurred by us and together. So, and I said this the other night.
But what I'm just trying to say is, it would be better if Wareham plant, even though if it costs us a little more money, goes to groundwater discharge.
Oh,
And then
absolutely,
in smaller
absolutely.
places in the community, as time goes on, and the wastewater management committee will look at this, because they have already. There's a whole number of places in this community where there may have been a development that was really tight, a lot of houses, and they put in a wastewater treatment plant with groundwater discharge, and it works really fine, and it's a good thing for the community. And then most of the nitrate, every time a waterfront septic comes across in front of the Board of Health, 9 out of 10 times they put in a nitrogen removal system because they're too close to the coastal habitat. The town of Bourne, compared to the town of Wareham, went in two different directions 30 years ago. Wareham went with sewerage, and Bourne went with doing sewer facilities on every house, one at a time. And nobody's ever compared it, other than when you look at Wareham, they've got some big issues, and you look at Bourne, they've got a little issue here, little issue there, and they address them immediately when one comes up. You gotta look at the discharge. This is nutrients. When it goes into the coastal habitat, just from the homes around the bay, the shellfish can eat it up. But when you dump millions of gallons in at once, then they can't eat it up because it's coming in too fast. You get algae blooms, and your coastal habitat just changes immensely. I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, just, if Guy was here, he could tell you, you know, the Wareham treatment facility is the area that actually treats. There's a septage and there's a sewerage. And, you know, they have 61 miles of pipe. They have 45 pump stations. None of them treat sewage. All they do is pump and transport. So, you know, it's just such a you know, poor use of money. And this is why, you know, when you read the Buzzards Bay master plan, that's exactly what they're putting forward. They're saying, listen, if we need to manage nitrogen in these embayments, you know, put small treatment plants. At that time, they were just beginning, this is back in the,
80s.
90. Actually, the CCMP was done in 91. And it was done by the, EPA, and there was just an action plan for all the cities and towns on what to do next. And none of it, there's not one word of,
Ocean
build
discharge.
large wastewater facilities and, put more wastewater into the bay. I mean, I just could not believe those words. I mean, I know the need, I know the, follow the money, Wareham needs the money, there's no question about that. But, as far as what's the best for the environment, it's just terrible. I mean, just so, such a poor choice. It's something that shouldn't even be considered, and I'm very surprised that our sewer commissioners are even, talking about it or, putting it as a alternative. We need to get beyond this. We need to throw this off the table. I had said on Bourne Residents that, we need to bring this to town meeting and have the town vote on it. We voted in '72 that we did not want to have wastewater going into the canal to, poison our environment. I think it's just going to be, to reaffirm of what we said 50 years ago, that, that this is our lifeblood, that we, this is, I rode around today just looking at the water. I mean, that's what the town's all about, is the embayments. And
All right, Tom, and I don't want to interrupt, but we're
No,
going to
go
run out of
ahead.
time. We've got 3 minutes. So if you want to call in with a question, please
Sorry.
call in. I want to explain, and again, I want to go back to the canal. I just want you to really understand that, or I'll go just to this picture that's right here. The wastewater, if wastewater was put into the canal, it's far more likely that it's going to come down into this area here than it'll ever get to Cape Cod Bay. It just won't make it to Cape Cod Bay. There's very little actual Buzzards Bay water, and you can see it in the summertime. Buzzards Bay water is very dark and very dense and has a lot of nutrients in it. Cape Cod Bay is very clear. And when the tide goes out into Cape Cod Bay, it just makes a little circle in front of the actual canal entrance, and it turns and comes back in. And I'm sure this summer, perhaps one of our videographers with a drone, or our local photographers with a drone, would get you a couple pictures of that. I've seen it from a plane. It's amazing. You would think it all goes out in Cape Cod Bay, but it doesn't. It only goes just to the end, and then it comes back in. And when it comes back in, a large percentage of it gets pushed into Buzzards Bay. Goes all, and that goes into Buzzards Bay. So you're not going to send anything away. You're going to be dumping this on your neighbors. You're not going to like this.
Skip, I just, one
Yeah, go ahead.
point that you had brought up earlier to me before we started rolling the camera, is that I had said the other night that we had a discharge from the Joint Base Cape Cod facility. And it really, the state considers it a groundwater discharge, even though they ran the pipe 7 miles across the base. They didn't actually put a discharge pipe into the bay, apparently.
The canal.
Into the canal. They put it into a sand filter bed on the edge of the canal. So it's not the same as the Maritime Academy. There is sand filter treatment prior to the movement of the water, prior to groundwater discharge to the canal.
All right.
But
Yeah, we're gonna wrap it up, Tom.
Sure.
Any other thing on the base? Of course, the base is not growing. The base is generally getting smaller. They got the sheriff's department out there in the jail, but other than that, the hospital's gone. A lot of the facilities are gone. So they're piping this over, but also their discharge is diminishing significantly, and it has been for a long time. They may increase it again.
Right.
But I gotta say goodnight. We're going off the air. Thanks for watching.